And so we want to open the space for an amazing Garifuna group, which is the Chief Joseph Chatoyer Garifuna Ensemble, who will offer their dance, their drums, and their songs to us tonight. Welcome.
Hey! Hey! Haruchuchu! Hagaña! Agua! Bolo! Arcoiris! Abeguatia! Ah, you don't make it, you don't get what you know. Ah, you don't make it, you don't get what you know. Mari wabo walua ina nya garina go walade bagura bagura wabo anye bagura bagura wabo walua ina garina go you don't make it buga wagara boy fire, fire, the show. Palua in the yaga. Ah, Ligiago, people. Ah, you may have to go. Ah, you may have to go. Oh, Ligiago, people. Fire, fire, the show. Palua in the yaga. Ah, Ligiago, people.
¿Has escuchado hablar de una cultura llamada Garifuna? Pues orgullosamente yo pertenezco a ella. Tengo la fortuna de pertenecer a una cultura llena de vida. Orgullosa de ser garífuna. Orgullosa de haber tenido la bendición de nacer bajo el manto de una raza que después de más de 200 años aún conserva su cultura, sus tradiciones y su lenguaje. Sí, estoy orgullosa de ser garífuna, orgullosa de ser descendiente de una raza valiente y decidida, de la única raza negra que no conoció la esclavitud. Antes de eso, mis ancestros prefirieron ser exiliados de San Vicente, la tierra que los vio nacer. Orgullosa de ser garífuna, orgullosa de pregonar que nosotros tenemos una bandera tricolor, negro, blanco y amarillo. Esa bandera representa la trayectoria de nuestro pueblo garífuna. Señores, no importa en dónde yo esté, con mucho orgullo comparto sobre mi gente y mi cultura. Simple y sencillamente porque nosotros amamos ser garífunas.
Arreaza ya namole luar, Arreaza ya no puedo re. Arreaza ya namole luar, Arreaza ya. Aliye be namore ya beno barua hanya, uye be ni dera wagungo. Aliye be namore ya beno barua hanya, uye be ni dera wagungo. Ya ubo wagungo, ya. Arreaza ya namole luar, Arreaza ya namole luar. Aliye be nagare ya beno barua hanya, uye be ni dera wagungo ya ubo. Aliye be nagare ya beno barua hanya. Uye be ni dera wagungo ya ubo. Ay alero la le don yo. Alero la le don yo. Perdón. Alero la le don yo. Yo no voy a mugo ni don lubeji baba. Alero la le don yo. Yo no voy a mugo ni don lubeji. Ganye no guyame. Aroga no guyame. Doni no arugumania. Hey ganye no guyame. Aroga no guyame. Doni no arugumania. Oh, una bomba mañana mole yere. Ay, una bomba mañana libori bobo. Ay, una bomba mama. Una bana luwe la mise. Aliño dama, alandin, eliño dama. We baba na bama go, namoga. Baba na bama go. Eliño dama, eliño dama. Baba na bama go, namoga. Baba na bama go. The one benade. The one benade. Don't need ganare godina. La tagara, but don't know why ma. I know we are. Ganare godina. Ani ba do no go do ni ama. Ele pa do olho gunhole. Ani ba do no go do sayoma. Ele pa do olho gunhole. Ai na mole la mole giru sa to go joro tele. Ai bon lo ba. Ai na mole la mole giru sa to go joro tele. Ai ne ba do no go do ni ama. Ne ba do no go do sayoma. Ai na mole la mole giru sa to go joro tele. Ai bon lo ba. Ai na mole la mole giru sa to go joro tele. La move kirusa to go to tele aya. Ah do digi do digi. 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 Aha. 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 1, 2. Can we get Some volume. Who's the techie? I can't hear the mic. I cannot hear the mic. 1, 2, 1, 2. I can't hear it. 1, 2, 1, 2. Good evening. Buenas tardes. Buenas noches. Cualquiera, uno de esos. So, this is Chief Joseph Chatouillier, Garifuna Folkloric Ballet of New York. Yes, and the key word this evening is Garifuna. Because a lot of people here in New York do not know a thing about who the hell the Garifuna people are. And mind you, there are millions of us here. Yes, we were exiled from the island of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So our ancestors ended up in Honduras. From Honduras, they spread to Belize, Guatemala, and Nicaragua. But nowadays, we're all over the United States of America, especially in the South Bronx. Okay, I'm in Harlem, so definitely the Bronx, right there. Okay, so we're here this evening. I do thank the opportunity to be here, to let you guys know about us. Do not try to understand the words of the songs, because it's not English, it's not Spanish, it's not French. It's the mixture of all three of them. All right? So, just for you to know, don't try it, because don't go there unless you are Garifuna. But how many here have ever heard about the Garifuna people before? Okay, there we go. So that means we're doing a good job. We're spreading the word. So with that said, let's go with the program. 1, 2. Can you guys hear me from here? Because I barely hear it. Maya huamba nude yago miro damba. Maya huamba nude yago. Oh, dame le bagabo. Anagira la riwagua. Mira ya garite, la ya nanige. Ami cha honti no, lo nere de no ya. Niagulara ni nura, niagulara ni benura mo, ay niagulara ni benura. Ay niagulara ni benura, ay niagulara ni benura, niagulara ni benura ma, ay niagulara ni benura. Percusión. Hagonya, mochane, mochane. Ay, que bunari na te mira guani re kate bi metia. Ay, na te mira guan. Que bunari na te mira guani re kate bi metia. Que bunari na te mira guani re kate bi metia. Que bunari na te mira guani re kate bi metia. Right. Hay una gudale nati nuago. Hay una gudale nati nuago. Lo ae lo monat. Tu me que nava no pian. Ae o ae o. I do, mama. Chumba. I do, mama. Chumba. I do, mama. La varane logo niga yo. La varane logo niga yo ma. I do, mama. I do, mama. I do, mama. I do, mama. La hora ne logo niga yo. Malaga. La hora ne logo niga yo ma. La hora ne logo niga yo. No chobana baore laore raga hello baraga bana chobana baore laore raga ban hello baraga bana chobana baore laore raga hello baraga bana chobana baore hello baraga bana chobana baore hello baraga bana chobana baore raga ban hello baraga bana chobana baore hello baraga bana chobana baore raga bana hello baraga bana chobana baore los varones también hello baraga bana chobana baore hello baraga bana chobana baore hello baraga bana chobana baore ya baore raga bana hello baraga bana chobana baore raga bana hello baraga bana chobana baore 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 hello baraga bana chobana no baore. Ay. Baore. Hello, Maragabana. No baore. Ay no Maragabana no baore. Hello Maragabana no baore. Hello, Baragabana, Jobana, Baore. No, Baragabana, Hui, Baore. Yes. How we doing so far? How we doing with timing? Okay. So we're gonna give you the last one before we step out these doors. We're gonna do what we call parranda. Hey! Hey! Ay, ay! Oh, oh, ay, 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 ay. Halia basa, irana mama, Halia basa, bigira na mama, Halia ba, bigira na mama, Halia ba, Halia ba, bigira na mama, Aliyaba, hey! Idame no wene, Hawaii ahara. Idame no wene. Hawaii ahara, hai mayawa amamenyo nao, ye wahume neremuse, hai mayawa amamenyo nao. Wahume mayawa amamenyuna o. Baumre, queremos saludos. Mayawa amamenyuna o. Baumre. That's right. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And this is Chief Joseph Chatouillet, also known as Garifuna Folkloric Ballet of New York. My name is Felix Gamboa, director of this beautiful dance company. All right. Huh? I got upset with the drum for a minute.
Can we give it up for the Chief Joseph Chatouillet Ensemble? Once more. Thank you so much. And so I have the pleasure and honor of introducing a comrade and friend who I have a long, long time of knowing and working with in the struggle, a friend of Cuba, a friend of Venezuela, internationalist, and also one of the folks who has envisioned and worked really hard to make this space happen. I want to welcome to the stage Manolo de los Santos, who told me exactly not to say everything I said.
Yeah, I told Claudia not to say any of that. But more importantly, I just want to present myself as a friend, a comrade of each and every one of you here. We are deeply honored to have your presence in the space tonight. Making this possible, this space possible, is not the dream of 1 year or 2 years or even 5 years. There are people who have been dreaming of this space for centuries. When our ancestors were taken and enslaved on this land, they dreamed about this space. When our people were fighting in the streets of New York City for the 8-hour workday, they were dreaming about a space like this. When our women comrades were fighting for their dignity, they were thinking about this space. When all our black freedom heroes rose up from the South and from the North, they thought about a space like this. So the coming of us together tonight is not a coincidence. It's not a mere act of gathering. There's a mystica, there's a reason that brings us tonight into community and into building a collective of people who choose every day to go out and transform the world. Are you with me? We have been waiting for quite a while, but when you're waiting for family to come, you just have to wait, right? And we're really honored that we have already here part of the Venezuelan delegation to the United Nations General Assembly this year. Can I give a big round of applause for them? in this moment in which Venezuela is being attacked left and right, and I mean left and right literally, we say Venezuela has the right, and it's earned the right, to speak for itself. We have created this forum precisely because we want a dialogue and a debate of ideas. We want the left, and more importantly, the people who have been forgotten, the people who have been left voiceless, to come together and share ideas. Certainly, we have a lot to learn tonight, and we're very excited that our comrades from Venezuela are also on the way and should be here within a few minutes. But we wanted to start this program by, again, welcoming you all into this space. This is your home. We are the People's Forum, and we are simply a movement incubator. We hope that this is not the first, and especially not the last time that you will visit us. This goes the same to our Venezuelan comrades. Please feel that this is a place where we can all come together. We have yet a lot of work to do, but I am sure as we build this collectivity, as we take in the lessons of struggle that have been accumulated over many years and many decades and many centuries, we will certainly overcome. Please feel welcome, and let's have an amazing night of debate and dialogue. Thank you.
Vamos a hacer algo aquí sobre la mística, que se vea bien la flor. So I have the amazing pleasure, thank you Manolo, and I give it up for Manolo. So I have the amazing pleasure of emceeing tonight, like I mentioned earlier, and the great pleasure of introducing a comrade and friend as well, who participated with us in the organizing around the Poor People's Campaign and National Call for Moral Revival. He is a reverend in Brooklyn, Lafayette, Avenue Presbyterian Church, and he will share with us some words. His name is Reverend David Tolfert.
Testing. Good evening, everyone. To the People's Forum, to Manolo, Reverend De La Cruz, and all of you comrades, I want to say thank you for this opportunity to be before you. I am clear that I am just warming up the microphone for those who come after me, so I will not be before you long. I am a preacher, beloved, so that means that there's just a piece of scripture I just want to share with you that will guide some of the words that I have been led to share. Here's what the Hebrew prophet in Isaiah says: "Let me sing for my beloved my love song concerning his vineyard. My beloved had a vineyard on a very fertile hill. He dug it and cleared it of stones and planted it with choice vines. He built a watchtower in the midst of it and hewed out a wine vat in it. He expected it to yield grapes, but it yielded wild grapes." Another translation says, "He expected it to bear good fruit, but some weeds got in it and made bad fruit." I just want to talk from this thought, the need to pull up some weeds. The need to pull up some weeds. A week ago, I heard a story. It was a story of two women who were working in a garden. One woman, her name is Peaches, is hard at work in the garden, trimming roses and planting flowers and making a home in the dirt for some seeds. Denise, who should have been working with her, trimming roses, planting flowers, and making a home in the dirt for the seeds, was distracted. Peaches looks at Denise and says, "You're supposed to be helping me. We came to trim roses. We came to plant flowers. We came to make a home in the dirt for these seeds. But you are distracted." And beloved, Denise, instead of answering, runs to a nearby fence and she begins to do a different kind of work. You see, the reason why she was so distracted, the reason why she couldn't trim those roses, the reason why she couldn't plant those flowers, the reason why she could not make a home in the dirt for those seeds is because there were some weeds coming over the neighbor's fence, causing chaos in the garden. And I just came to say that it's a shame when weeds in your neighbor's backyard begin to cause chaos where there's supposed to be fertile ground for hope. When chaos begins to infiltrate where there is supposed to be rosebuds of possibilities. And in case you haven't caught it yet, I'm not talking about gardening anymore. I came to declare that just like this woman who saw something she could not ignore, we can't celebrate Nelson Mandela and Martin Luther King Jr. without celebrating the movements that made them. Movements that were all about recognizing weeds called capitalism, weeds called materialism, weeds called militarism, weeds called white supremacy that cause chaos in these yet-to-be United States, causes chaos in South Africa, and causes chaos in the gardens of Central America. Beloved, there is a movement going on. That drum major for justice, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., that luminary for liberation, Nelson Mandela, both represent movements that got them imprisoned and killed. And on the eve of his assassination, Dr. King was working on something that a few of us have dared to pick back up. Keep working on the ground of humanity that is fertile. Keep working on the ground of human rights that are fertile. The ground of love, hope, and possibility are fertile. But watch this. What Mandela and Dr. King realized is that when the weeds of militarism and white supremacy and capitalism and patriarchy cause chaos, they cause death. So the Poor People's Campaign was birthed out of a deep conviction that when God looked down, as Isaiah puts it, she didn't intend for people to have to wonder where their next meal is coming from. She didn't intend for people to not to be able to afford for their basic necessities to live. She did not intend for people to be starving in the streets. She didn't intend for people to be collateral damage for an empire clothed in the trappings of democracy, causing chaos all over the world through its military. I just have a feeling that she didn't intend for children in Flint and Puerto Rico and Venezuela to not have access to food, water, and good schools. So if God intended for us to live in a garden of equality, equity, and justice, but that garden has been ravaged by weeds. Weeds that have produced the genocide that happened on this continent called North America. Weeds that produced the Berlin Conference that carved up Africa in 1885. Those same weeds of militarism, capitalism, white supremacy, patriarchy, and ecological devastation. I just came here to declare that maybe we need some people like Denise ready to go pull up some weeds. See, I come from a tradition called liberation theology. So I come from a long line of weed pullers. Weed pullers like Ignacio Elecura. Weed pullers like Oscar Romero. Weed pullers like Nelson Mandela and Martin Luther King Jr. and sisters like Katie Cannon and Dolores Williams and Rosa Parks and Diane Nash. All I'm trying to say is I come from a line of people who can pull up some weeds. And I just hope there are a few of us here that know we need some people willing to recognize and call out the systems hurting our people, hurting our children, and make the connection that a movement for and by the poor can't just be local, it needs to be global. So watch what happens, beloved. Watch this. Denise goes over to that gate and see the weeds coming and begins to pull them up. And watch this, she recognizes the chaos being caused in the garden, and her partner Peaches has no choice but to join her at the gate and recognize what's going on. And all I came to say is that as much chaos is in the world today, as many headlines come and go that vie for our attention, there are people all over this world who need us to join them in pulling up some weeds. They're not just in Compton, they're also in Caracas. They're not just in San Francisco, they're also in Sao Paulo. They're not just in Detroit, they're also in New Delhi. They're not just in Harlem, but they're also in Havana. They're not just in Los Angeles, but they're also in Lagos. They're not just in Paris, but they're also in Palestine. All I came to say is we need some weed pullers who are ready to work, get in step together. Because there may be some weeds causing chaos, but there's a garden of equality worth fighting for. Let's roll up our sleeves and get to work.
We just went to church. Amen. I cheer to that. Thank you so much, Reverend. And so, how many of you picked this up as you walked in? Tricontinental. If you didn't, please do pick Tricontinental Dossier, please. I have the pleasure, the immense pleasure and honor to present a brother who is a friend of people in struggle, an internationalist, someone who is not only a journalist, but he is also an organizer, an activist, and scholar. If you don't know him, you best to know him. And he is #goals. And his name is Vijay Prashad. We would like to welcome you and thank you.
the president of Cuba spoke directly about the question of solidarity. He spoke of Cuba's history of solidarity, its history of solidarity in sending out people for the missions on health, on literacy, but also, very importantly, solidarity with the national liberation movements of Africa. He spoke of Cuba's role in Namibia, Cuba's role in Angola, and then he used a very powerful phrase. He spoke of Cuba's role in demoralizing, that was the word he used, demoralizing the apartheid state in South Africa. Now, why this word demoralizing is so important is that many of you may not know that the Cuban troops arrived in Angola, and as part of the defense of the Angolan people against the racist armies of South Africa, the Cuban people fought alongside the Angolans in the town of Punta Conivale and scored an incredible victory against the South African military. You know, not often in world history do we have armies of the people defeat the armies of the imperialists. It doesn't happen often. In the history of Asia, for instance, it has always been a mark of pride that the Japanese defeated the Russian Empire in 1905. But of course, the Japanese army was not the army of the people. Before that, in 1895-96, the Ethiopian forces defeated the armies of the Italians. But friends, let's be frank, the Ethiopian army was not the army of the people. The Ethiopian army was the army of an imperial regime. When the Cubans went to Africa and joined the Angolan forces of national liberation against the South Africans, that was an army of the people that defeated a highly motivated, trained, and equipped army, the army of apartheid South Africa. Now, the Cuban president, Diaz-Canel, said yesterday that the defeat of the South Africans demoralized not only the South African army, because friends, the demoralization of the South African army wasn't the sole point of the story. What he was reminding us about, and I think this is very important for our times, was that the defeat at Punta Conivale of the South African forces demoralized the apartheid regime. This war took place in 1987. Apartheid collapsed in 1994. But it was only after Punta Conivale that the fascistic white apartheid regime of South Africa had to seriously open negotiations with the South African Liberation Forces led by the African National Congress and its allies, including the South African Communist Party. The Cuban contribution in Africa is not a marginal contribution. It was a central contribution to the destruction of the apartheid regime. But I want to take us back just a little bit. Behind me is an interesting picture. It's Madiba, Nelson Mandela, whose statue now is in that little strange place of UN land. There's, of course, Comandante Chavez in the middle, and I'll say something about Chavez in a minute. And then there's Martin Luther King Jr. On solidarity, when we think of the phrase solidarity, we think of the slogan, I stand with. I stand with South African people against the apartheid regime. I stand with the Cuban people against US imperialism, etc. I stand with. In that phrase, stand with, the two words are very important. The word stand and the word with. You can't stand by yourself. You can't stand up for something alone. You see, there is a tradition of bearing witness to atrocity, where an individual could stand up and say, I bear witness against atrocity. But typically, when we think of the word stand, we're talking about the context of a political action. When we stand with, it's in a context that we are standing. We stand with other people. The with is important. With means that we're standing with somebody specific for a reason. We're not just standing for nothing. We're not just standing for an abstract idea. We're standing for something concrete. So it's not only the context that we have to consider when we think of solidarity, standing. We don't want to stand alone. But we have to also think about who we're standing with, which begs the question of why we're standing with someone. It's important when we think of the American civil rights struggle to think about context. It didn't just happen at any time. This movement picked its steam up during the movement of decolonization in Africa, in Asia, and of course in parts of Latin America. It was the decolonization movement around the world that provides the context for the American civil rights movement. In the United States, when they tell the story of the civil rights movement, they treat it as a peculiarly American story. A story about Americans trying to realize the destiny of American people. An injustice in the 19th century, perhaps in the 18th century, which is redeemed by Americans through an American struggle. It's an unfortunate suffocating of the civil rights story, which was always part of an international moment. If we just take the story of King, you'd have to remember that King was interested in India. He was interested in what had happened in India. He, after all, traveled to India in the 1950s and in Ebony magazine wrote a very moving story called My Visit to the Land of Gandhi. When he was in India, King visited in the city of Bombay the room where Gandhi used to stay. And in this room, which was now a museum, King wanted to spend the night. The people who controlled the museum said, nobody can stay here at night. It's not possible. You can visit and then you have to leave. King said, no, I would like to spend the night here. They said, there's no proper bed and you're an American. And Americans can't sleep on the floor. And you might be a civil rights leader, but you are really an American. There's no proper toilet here and you won't manage. You better go back to the five-star hotel. But King said, I want to be here. And he spent the night in this museum room in order to feel the spirit of Gandhi. But actually, I don't think he wanted just to feel the spirit of Gandhi. Because this is the 1950s. It's in this period, in the 1950s, that all these states are winning their independence. India, of course, was independent in 1947. But 10 years later, just when King is in India, Ghana wins its independence. A monumental episode in the history of national liberation on the African continent. In 1959, Cuba has its revolution. And that Cuban revolution, will look immediately to the United States and make its link to the civil rights struggle. And I don't merely mean that when Fidel Castro comes to the United Nations in 1960, I don't merely mean that when Castro comes here, the US government makes it impossible for him to find a hotel room. And so Malcolm X invites him to the Lenox Hotel in Harlem. I don't merely mean that. I mean that inside Cuba, there's an entire cultural project of solidarity with the American civil rights struggle. And it was through its solidarity materials that people around the world were able to experience
no es que le permitieron simplemente que dinero en China, sino que el gobierno chino hizo una aportación muy clara y específica para la lucha de los derechos civiles, eso dentro de los Estados Unidos a nivel mundial, y por lo tanto abochornando al gobierno estadounidense. Si van y leen las comunicaciones del Departamento de Estado, que son disponibles públicamente, verán que cada vez que pasa algo, están en los titulares de Pravda, en la prensa soviética. Y el Departamento de Estado norteamericano fue muy sensible a la tendencia de los soviéticos, los cubanos y otros de los movimientos no alineados que pudieron utilizar la brutalidad dentro de los Estados Unidos para mostrar qué capaz era. Pudo poner su vida, porque hubo en el proceso de la descolonización, porque después de todo,
subjects, and they were struggling for decolonization. Stand and then with. Who are you standing with? You are standing with the fighters for justice inside the United States. There was a concrete element of solidarity. That's why fighters for justice within the United States have always been invited when they go into exile into these countries. Asada Shakur, for instance, isn't living in London. They've always been given refuge because solidarity is not just an abstract idea. You are in solidarity with somebody. You're in solidarity with a movement. Go back to South Africa. You see, stand and with. The context for both South Africa and Palestine was terrible. South Africa and Palestine were two of the few places that were unable to win even formal decolonization during the era of decolonization. The era of decolonization runs from the 1940s to the 1980s. Both South Africa and Palestine were not allowed to become free, even formally free, during the era of decolonization. Their constrained freedom came in the 1990s. In South Africa, when apartheid formally ended in 1994, and for the Palestinian people when the Oslo Accords were signed around that same time, 93 and 94. In both cases, and I want us to think about this seriously, in both cases, the national liberation struggles had to surrender. I put it to you that in Palestine and in South Africa, the national liberation forces surrendered to the international capitalist order. So solidarity with Palestine and with South Africa was very strong from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and continues today. The residue of that solidarity is with us still. But the national liberation forces in both contexts had to surrender. See, we don't think of that term when we think of what happened to those two national liberation movements, but I want you to focus on it for a second. Palestine, the surrender is clearer. In Palestine, the surrender was in such a situation that the Palestinian leadership, after the first Intifada that broke out in 1987, the same year that the Cuban troops helped the Angolans defeat the South African apartheid forces in Punta Conivale in 1987, the first Intifada breaks out. But by 1991, when the Soviet Union collapsed, the major rock for international struggles disappeared. And the United States became the sole superpower. Now, you know, friends, it's a curious thing. We don't like to talk about the Soviet Union in anything but trying to sort of skip it out of our story. We don't want to get into it. People are embarrassed to talk about the Soviet Union. But if you're embarrassed to talk about the Soviet Union, you don't understand how the era of decolonization was able to take place. It was the existence of the Soviet Union that enabled the era of decolonization to become a real thing. The surrender in Palestine took place in the context where the United States was the sole superpower and basically forced the Palestinian leadership, itself exhausted in its struggles, to come to Oslo and then to Ohio and sign the surrender document, which was the Oslo Accord. At the same time, the South African National Liberation Forces entered into a dialogue with the apartheid regime. Nelson Mandela was brought out of Robben Island, and they signed a surrender document, a mediated settlement in which the new South African government was not going to touch the monopoly capital wealth of the white apartheid elite. That was a surrender in 1994. The context of South Africa should never be forgotten, which is why if we are disappointed today by things we see in South Africa, it's not because the national liberation movement was not itself a coherent force to struggle to transform the world. It's not because of that. It's because of the surrender that the national liberation movement accepted in 1994 and didn't touch white monopoly capitalism in South Africa. Which is why, for instance, the issue of land in South Africa is back on the table. It is why such a small number of white monopoly capitalists control most of the wealth in South Africa. The context changes yet again in the third phase. As I said, we'll come to Chavez in a minute. I'm coming to Chavez now. Comrade, since you have arrived now, I'm going to talk about Chavez. It's a curious moment for me to talk about Chavez just as you arrive. That means the Comandante is giving messages somehow in the universe. The context changes in this third phase. You know, when the Soviet Union collapses, the United States is the sole superpower, pushes its own agenda through multilateral organizations, International Monetary Fund, World Bank, and of course the United Nations, which an American ambassador, Daniel Patrick Moynihan, in his memoir called A Dangerous Place. In the period after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the IMF pushed a very harsh agenda against the third world as a consequence of the third world debt crisis. And it's in this period, this harsh agenda against the peoples of the planet, that a series of very important uprisings begin. They were known as IMF riots. And we know the most famous of those IMF riots took place in Venezuela in 1992, the Caracazo. Now let's not minimize the importance of this uprising, because this actually starts the context of the third period. It's the period when people pushed back against unipolar imperialism thrust upon the world by the United States, which had come to imagine itself as having eternal power over the planet. And it's because people said no. It's because people said no that movements took seriously the possibility that an alternative was possible. You know, at the World Social Forum, the slogan was so empty. It was, another world is possible. Such an empty slogan. Another world is possible. What does it even mean, another world is possible? But what those people said when they rose up in places like Caracas, they didn't say another world is possible. They said socialism is necessary. You see, another world is possible. Another world is possible is a slogan without a content. It has no content. It doesn't say anything. Yes, another world is possible. Fascism is possible. It doesn't say anything. Trump is possible. Trumpism is possible. Even worse. But what the people were saying is socialism is necessary. And it's that produces Chavez. See, Chavez is the embodiment of that struggle. See, we don't in our movement believe that people are like gods. We don't believe that. We believe that people make history. But people also make their leaders. People conjure up their leaders from amongst themselves. And the leader then is the mirror of popular aspirations. That is what we need to understand to put flesh to the bone of Chavez. But of course, immediately the attack comes. The attempted coup in 2002 against the government of Chavez. And then Chavez does something unforgivable. You see, it's one thing to try and make socialism in one country. But Chavez tries to take the region with him. He has with him his comrade Evo Morales. By the way, yesterday, Evo Morales in the Security Council, sitting one seat away from Trump, read Trump the Riot Act. Yesterday, Evo Morales told Trump about US imperialism. in case Trump doesn't know that history. Because he doesn't. You see, Trump is now worrying about Chinese interference in the American election. Evo Morales said, you interfered in Iran. You interfered in Guatemala. And then they tried the coup in 2002 in Venezuela. And in Honduras in 2009. Quite right. And everywhere else. I mean, you can start reciting the names of 192 countries. Friends, we used to joke, and I'm going to end very soon. We used to joke, friends. We used to ask the question, why isn't there a coup d'etat in the United States? And our answer was, because in the United States, there's no US embassy. The attack on Venezuela was harsh and remains harsh. And the attack is harsh, friends, because it is threatening to imperialism to put on the table the concrete possibility of socialism. It is threatening to put on the table the concrete possibility that the Latin American hemisphere will exit from imperialism. It is threatening that the idea of socialism will then catch on among people who have previously been involved in IMF riots, who continue to be involved in IMF riots, and are fed up with the possibility that this is going to continue forever. Because, friends, because what capitalism gives us is life without a future. Capitalism tells you the misery you have today is going to last forever. Capitalism doesn't have the future tense. It has the past tense and the present tense. Human beings don't want to live in the present tense. Human beings want to live in the future tense. And the future tense, friends, is socialism. See you in the future.
Many thanks to our friend Vijay Prashad. If there's someone who makes me smile about socialism today, it's Vijay. But we also have many other reasons to smile about socialism and the perspective of a future in which we all can live with dignity. That's why we're really honored tonight to have the presence of someone that I want to call my brother, someone that I want to call my comrade, someone who at a very young age made a decision to follow the revolutionary path. Someone who right now is being heavily demonized by certain sectors of the US media and propaganda systems. But we are very honored to have him here tonight. And it's our dear friend, comrade, Foreign Minister, Jorge Arreaza.
Hello. How many here speak Spanish? How many speak English? Most of them, huh? I'm going to try to do it in English. First of all, I'm very happy I'm late because we were with President Maduro. He just met with the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, who is he's a good man. He's not able to do many things. He's like trapped because the bureaucracy of the United Nations has many limits, many restrictions. But the trip that President Maduro has made to New York has given us the opportunity to tell the truth about Venezuela. Okay, maybe someone can say it's not the truth. It's your version of the truth. Okay, it's our version of the truth. But our version of the truth, you cannot hear about it elsewhere. Huh? Have you seen CNN, Fox News, CBS, or in Europe, Euronews, Spanish television, Portuguese television, Dutch television, German television? We are demonized because we're socialist. These three men here, Madiba, Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King, and our father, Hugo Chavez, were socialists. On Monday, they made a, ¿cómo se dice homenaje? A tribute to Madiba in the United Nations. But the version of Madiba in the United Nations is the man of peace, the man of dialogue, the man who fought for equality against the apartheid and all this, which is not false. But Madiba was a socialist. Madiba was a rebel. Madiba fought even with weapons. And Madiba was, one of his best friends was called, he is probably our grandfather, Fidel Castro. And we are sure that he did what he could after being released. And he couldn't go further. But we are sure that if he would have been younger, he would have built a path or opened a path towards socialism in Africa, not only in South Africa. And of course, Martin Luther King is also a reference for all. He had a dream, which is our dream. And Vijay now, he said that socialism is necessary. Where is it? Oh, there you are. I would say that socialism is not necessary, it's indispensable. If we want to have a future tense, if we want our children to have children, and to have food, and to have water, and to have health, education, culture, then we need socialism. Sorry, I'm talking about socialism. I think I have to take my tie away. That's only for the UN and diplomacy. And talking about Venezuela, which is the main issue here, you must know that Comandante Chavez, he had faith. He was a believer in two main subjects. In God, he believed in God, and in the people. No? He always said, the people, when they are awake, they are always right. When there's consciousness, they always take the right decisions. And even when we lost one election during his period of being president of Venezuela, by a very small margin. And he said, we were wrong. I said, oh, no, Comandante, how can you say we were wrong? If the people didn't support us, our people that have consciousness, that have been under a revolution for It was only 7 years then, but that was a lot then. Then we did something wrong. So we have to rectify, we have to review what we have done. He believed in the people. And what happened in Venezuela, in order for you to understand, we have too much petroleum, too much oil. We have too much gas. We have too much gold, silver, diamonds, water, natural resources. It's a gift of nature or of God, maybe, I don't know. It's in our territory, which is less than 1 million square kilometers, we have too many resources. And those resources were controlled by the elite that rules in Washington. I would never say by the United States of America, because if I say the United States of America, I'm talking about the people of the United States of America, whom we love and we respect. They always say that in Venezuela there's no democracy. They said that Comandante Chavez was a dictator, and they say now that Nicolás Maduro is an even worse dictator than Chavez. Chavez was a soldier. He was a very humble, he comes from a very humble family, poor family. He grew up poor, and he wanted to play baseball. And in order to play baseball, he decided that because he had no money, probably if he was enrolled in the army, in the National Armed Forces, maybe he would have the chance to be in the army's team. And so that's why he became a military. And once he was there and he learned about history and he saw how important concepts like sovereignty, like independence are, then he said, one moment, okay, I like baseball, but there is something wrong in this society, and I believe that using this knowledge that I am receiving here, I can help my people. And inequality is so obvious that I have to do something, and we have the weapons here. We have the power here. So if I convince a group of my fellows here that we have to change this country, we can do it. He was a dreamer, but his dreams, most of them, many of his dreams came to be real. They were true, finally. And Nicolás Maduro comes from the grassroots. He's a driver, a bus driver. He was in the unions. That's what I ask the American people. Can a unionist or a soldier become president of the United States? If you are not in the Republican Party or the Democrat Party, can you become president of the United States? Then is there democracy in Venezuela, or is there democracy in the United States? No? It was President Lincoln who said, the government of the people, for the people, with the people, by the people. Well, that's what we're trying to build in Venezuela. We're trying to organize our people, or to it's not the state or the party organizing the people, it's the people organizing themselves. We facilitate the process because we have the control of the resources, and we give resources to the people, all kinds of resources, human resources, money, knowledge, in order for them to have consciousness and to organize themselves. And we always remember Lincoln in that sense, because that is a socialist concept. It is. The government of the people, for the people, by the people, that is socialism as well. And all that has happened in Venezuela since the revolution is in power is that now the people control the natural resources and the revenue that Venezuela has. And it has been invested in health, in education, in culture, in infrastructure, in the people. The first thing that Comandante Chavez did when he had, after he had to struggle and there was a coup d'etat and there was a sabotage to our oil industry, and he finally had the control of PDVSA, which is our oil industry, what he did with the money, with the income, was invested in education and in health. He brought doctors. The Venezuelans had never seen doctors in the barrios, in the how do you say, en el campo, in the countryside. No? Nowadays, in spite of all the difficulties, there's a doctor who lives a block away from your house, or maybe he's your neighbor, and you knock his door at any time of the day, and he's there to help you. And if you don't knock his door, he's going to come tomorrow and knock your door to see how you are. No? And they were, at first, we conveyed the Venezuelan doctors. We failed. Venezuelan doctors were educated in these universities, which are very similar to the universities here in the United States. And they were not interested in the poor. They wanted to be rich. I want to be a doctor because I want to be rich. But Fidel Castro told Comandante Chavez, no, Hugo, doctors in Cuba are not like that. So he sent thousands of doctors, and they lived in the houses of the people, in a room, and the people gave them food of their own. And then they began to organize a university in the barrios. These doctors became the professors, the lecturers, the teachers of the Venezuelans that are now doctors, that they are now graduating as doctors. And now we have 35,000 new doctors, Venezuelan doctors. Huh? The second thing he did was for a program for illiteracy, the people who didn't know how to read and write. And we have had these kind of programs in the past, and it took years. And in 1 year, with the Cuban help, more than 1 million and 1.5 million, huh? Yes, 1.5 million Venezuelans learned to read and to write. And the UNESCO had to go to Venezuela and say we were a free country of illiteracy, you know? And then he said people need houses. And President Maduro delivered some months ago the house number 2 million, which for us is a lot. It's 10 million Venezuelans with new houses, a third of the population. And these houses were not for the bureaucrats, were not for the rich, were not for the middle class, were for the poor. For those who lived in the mountains and when it rained, they were in risk. For those, and the houses are, I cannot say they are free, but they are almost free. You can pay your house in 30 years without any interest rate and what. So it's, and if you see the Venezuelans today living in those buildings, and it's not a little house with 1 room. It's 3 rooms, 2 bathrooms, no? Apartments, houses. It depends. If you live in an indigenous area zone, then your house has to be built by the indigenous architecture, no? And it has changed Venezuela. All this what Comandante Chavez called misiones socialistas, the socialist missions. And I was remembering when VJ began, when he said that Chavez spoke and he was a socialist, the first time that he said it was after the referendum in 2004. In December, he went to China and he said, we believe in socialism. But many of them said, nah, that's a politician. He's in China, they are socialists, so he says that he's a socialist. No? But then he went to Brazil, to the social forum there. And in the Gigantinho, which is a gigantic stadium, it was full, and he said, I have reached a conclusion. The only way to surpass, to overcome capitalism, the only way, there is no third way, the only way is socialism. That's what he said. And then the peoples and the press began to say he wants to build a Cuba, he wants to build the Soviet Union in Latin America. And he said, no, no, this is a different kind of socialism. This is a democratic socialism. This is another time. This is not the 20th century. This is the 21st century. And this socialism in the Venezuelan case is also, how do you say, alimentado, fed by Bolivarianism. Bolivar, Simón Bolívar. That's why we're called the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. It's not the Bolivian. Bolivia is another country, and it's called Bolivia because of Simón Bolívar. But Bolivarianismo is what we really are. Because 200 years ago, there was another empire. It was the Spanish Empire. And when you spoke about republics against monarchies, then you were a revolutionary. And Simón Bolívar made a revolution, and he created not one, but 6 republics. And he wanted to go to the south, to Argentina, and he wanted to go to Cuba, he wanted to go to Puerto Rico, but he couldn't, because they killed him in some way. No? But he fought for the independence, and he said that the big nation that was becoming, how do you say, a potencia, a superpower in the north of the Americas, in 1829 was really, he said that we couldn't trust them. Well, 200 years ago this year, he had a debate, an epistolar debate by letters with the government of the United States then, because they said that they were going to help Venezuela or Colombia, because we were building a big project which was called Colombia, to be free, to win the war against Spain. But actually what they did was they were helping the Spaniards. They were helping the Spanish in order to defeat the Venezuelans. And they sent weapons and they sent ships, and he had he made a protest, a diplomatic protest then. And he said, I don't trust these people. I mean, I admire their history, George Washington and all, but what are they doing? Why don't they help us? They are helping Spain, no? And then in 1929, how could we translate this? The United States of America está destinada por la providencia. Seems destined by providence to plague of misery, to plague the Americas of misery in the name of freedom. 1929. And that's written. And it happened. It was like a prophet. It happened. That's true. There are no coup d'etats in the United States because there's no embassy of the United States here. Yeah. But what is to regret is that at this moment, the United States is planning coup d'etats, not in 1973 against Allende, not in 1954 against Arbenz, Jacobo Arbenz in Guatemala, not against João Goulart in Brazil in the 60s. It's today in the 21st century. And you know why? Because this Bolivarianismo They believe it's a threat to their national security because they believe in the Monroe Doctrine. 1823. James Monroe, President of the United States, the State of the Union, he went there and he said, this hemisphere is for the United States. No, we don't want here Spain or Germany or the United Kingdom, England or whomever. This is ours. Okay, then I must say that was important because it was like how do you say disuasive or dissuasive? I don't know. No, it made those countries stay away from the Americas. But it was only for that then, no? Not 200 years after. And now President Trump, 2 days ago, he said in the United Nations that he believed in the Monroe Doctrine. And one of the sins that the Venezuelans are committing is that we have good relations with China, or with Russia, or with Turkey. That is not permitted. That is not allowed by Washington. So now they want to have control again. And there is this government from this guy Maduro, no? That we try to withdraw him, we try to kill him, we try to do coup d'etats, we try to do referendums, we try to do everything, and this man is still there. No? He's still there. He's here in New York. This period of the General Assembly of the UN was meant to be the time to say goodbye to socialism and to Maduro. This was to celebrate that Maduro was no longer president of Venezuela. This was to celebrate that he had resigned because of all the pressure. He quit his job. He was in Cuba protected by the communists, no? Or they had killed him, like they tried to kill him the 4th of August the 4th with drones. So this was, but it didn't happen, and it didn't happen. And the worst thing is that Maduro came to New York and he gave a speech, and he's the president. And there's a new president in Cuba, and he's not Fidel Castro, he's not Raúl Castro, he's Díaz-Canel, and he's socialist. And he believes in the Cuban Revolution. And there's this indigenous president in Bolivia. And yesterday he told President Trump that he was the dictator. No? And then there is this guerrillero, this guerrilla man in Nicaragua, he was overthrown somehow with a war in the 80s, and then they organized these elections in 1990, and they played with the fear of the people of Nicaragua, and then he lost the elections. And 17 years after, he became president again, and he has the support of his people, and he's president in Nicaragua as well. And okay, President Lula of Brazil, he's been imprisoned. You know why? Because if he was free, if he were to be free, he would win the elections in the first round of the elections. But the candidate he's supporting, who no one knew about him really, because the Brazilian people were expecting Lula to be released because there's no reason for him to be in jail, only the political reason. Well, this candidate, whose name is Haddad, is now tied in the first place in the surveys with the surveys of the election. So he will most probably become president in Brazil. And in Mexico, there's going to be a new government as well. That's why this persecution against Cristina in Argentina, against Rafael Correa in Ecuador, against Lula. But if they were to be in power in Venezuela, if they were to kill Maduro or to win even an election, no, we wouldn't be in jail. we will be killed. No? Because you know what the media say, Maduro is not only a socialist, he's a dictatorship, he's a drug dealer, he's a mafia capo, he's a monster. No, so there's no need for a judicial process, there's no need for that. We are, and all of us, not only the ministers or the main people in the party, no, the social leaders of the consejos comunales, of the comunas, they would be, how do you say, perseguidos, persecuted, exterminated. And I'm not exaggerating here, I'm telling what it would happen. So that's why they want Maduro out of power. And they have done everything, and they will try to do much more. And we will resist. And we will prevail. Venceremos. And you see, I don't want to be too long, but yesterday when President Maduro, his plane took off like at 9 o'clock in the morning, like at 10, we had no way to communicate with the president because he has no Wi-Fi in the plane. And suddenly we see the social networks, and they say Trump said that he would meet with Maduro if Maduro were to be in New York and whatever. So what's this about? Yes, he was asked if he would meet Maduro, and he said, well, if that would help and he's here, well, I don't deny that possibility. Okay, very good. Then before the plane landed, then the Colombian media said at 4 o'clock, 4 p.m., President Maduro and President Trump are going to meet in the United Nations. I mean, I couldn't ask President Maduro. I said, maybe, I don't know about this, and this is going to happen, no? So when President Maduro arrived and he landed and he was going down the stairs of the plane, I said, hey, President Trump is saying that he could meet with you. What? With me? Yeah. When? Where? Why? I don't know. It's all over the world. And he said, okay, if he wants to meet with me, if I have to meet with the devil in order to help my people, I would meet with the devil. Yeah. And he said it last night. I believe President Maduro's address to the General Assembly last night or evening was a very good speech. I mean, we have to study because he had no teleprompter. He didn't read a paper. No? When you see President Trump doing like this, or President Maduro, no, President what's his name? No, the one of Ecuador, Lenin Moreno. He's in a wheelchair, but he's doing like this also. It's because they have the speech that's been written by someone, no, and they read it and they are good. Sometimes you don't believe that they are reading, no? Or there are other presidents that read a paper and then they have worked and they have studied. But President Maduro spoke from the heart. No, he came to say the truth. And all this trying to label a humanitarian crisis in Venezuela. Why? Because this humanitarian label would allow, by a doctrine, which is not in the international law, but it's a doctrine called the responsibility to protect. No? That would allow the United States Army, government, to invade Venezuela. Because if there is a humanitarian crisis, today the president of Chile, Sebastián Piñera, said, I cannot understand how there can be such a selfish man. What's the other adjective he used? An ambitious man, a bad man as Maduro, who is making his people be in pain without food, without water, without oxygen, without nothing. And he doesn't accept our humanitarian help. No? We have, only in Europe, we have more than $1,500 million blocked. In the banking system, all together, we probably have more than $3 $3,000 million blocked. No? Why don't they give us our money back so that we can buy or produce what we need in Venezuela? You know what's happening? We send the ships with oil to some countries, and they arrive and they deliver the oil, and these people want to pay back. They have to pay, no? And the bank says, no, I'm not paying. I'm not working with Venezuela. So how can I pay? I don't know. That's your problem, not mine. Like in Brazil, they owe us more than $50 million because we give electricity to the north of Brazil, Venezuelan electricity to the north of Brazil. And the Brazilian government, which is not our friend at all, said, I'm sorry, I cannot pay. I have tried by all the means with all the banks, European banks, American banks, Asian banks, and there is no way to pay Venezuela the money. And then there was this rumor in Roraima, the state which receives the electricity. Maduro, the dictator, is going to cut off the service. We're gonna be like in the 18th century. We will not have electricity. And Maduro told the governor, she's a lady of Roraima, please come speak to me and I'll let you know. And he said, hey, I'm sorry because there have been some, how to say, apagones, blackouts, because in the towers of electricity when the vegetation grows so we are working on that. We're going to cut all of that, and you must say we would never stop giving electricity to the people of Roraima, not even if they owed us $3,000 million. So you can be happy. It's not going to happen. But she said, but the media said that you were going to leave all the Roraima state with a blackout in the darkness. No. That's what the media says. Maduro is telling you, even if you want it for free, if you need it and you cannot pay it, we will give you the electricity. But that's an example. The people, my staff in the mission here, or in the consulate, or in the embassy in Washington, I owe them 5 months of salary, 6 months of salary. It's not because we don't have the money, it's because we cannot pay. I even thought on bringing the money in cash, but then I said, no, what happens if they find a Venezuelan minister with a lot of cash? Then, no? And I'm avergonzado, I'm ashamed, embarrassed because of that, but they have to understand. We will solve it. We talked about this with the Secretary General. They have a bank here, the Bank of the United Nations. Let's see. But another example. In this year, we had to begin the vaccination program in January. Everything was set. Everything was ready. We had to pay the PARHO, which we call the OPS, the Pan American Health Organization, and we sent the money. It was I remember it was $8 million. Sent the money, and 5 days after they said no, the transaction was not allowed. The money is back in Venezuela, and the vaccines in the United States. Okay, let's send the money by this other bank. We sent the money. 5 days after, money was back in Venezuela. We spoke to the people of the PARHO. Help us, please. We should have began on January, and we finally began on April. After the people of the PARHO here went to the OFAC, the Treasury office here, and they almost kneel, and they told them, I need an account to receive the Venezuelan money because they are late on their vaccination program. And finally, these OFAC people gave them one possibility, one bank, one account. They had to fill a lot of application forms to say that that money was not for the mafias of Maduro, that money was not for the drug dealing, that money was not for that, to kill little boys or whatever. And finally, we could pay for the vaccines. No? But now, you know that some Venezuelans have how you say, fled, have gone away, have se han ido. No? We have migration, which is new for us, because we have 5 million Colombians living in Venezuela. No? We have almost a million amongst Peruvians, Bolivians, Ecuadorians, and whatever. We have Portuguese, 400,000, Spaniards, 500,000, or whatever. Arabs, we have a lot of immigrants in Venezuela, and they live peacefully, and they have access to our education system, to our health system, to everything. So now, because of the blockade, no, because it has been difficult in the Venezuelan economy, the Venezuelans that have traveled to Peru or to Colombia or whatever, then they are used to get money from the United Nations, to get money from the government of the United States, of the European Union. So now you see President of Colombia saying, I need $50 million to address the humanitarian crisis in the border of Colombia, where we have 1 million Venezuelans living there. And then the President of Ecuador says we have 1 million Venezuelans. We receive 6,000 Venezuelans on a daily basis. 6,000. How many buses do you need for that? For 1 day? For 2 days? For 1 week? There's not an amount of buses in all Latin America. It would take 7 years for that to happen. 1 million Venezuelans. No, there is migration. Maybe 30,000 Venezuelans in Ecuador, maybe. Maybe in Colombia. And many of them are Colombians and Venezuelans at the same time. Maybe there's 100,000 Venezuelans, Colombians, both in Colombia, yes. Maybe in Chile there is, I don't know, 50,000 Venezuelans. Okay, but 4 million? Huh? And then in the north of Brazil, the ACNUR, how do you say ACNUR? The Refugee Office of the United Nations. They, with the government, the federal government of Brazil, they built these refugee camps. And if you are Venezuelan and you say that Maduro is looking for you, that he is persecuting you, that you are his political victim, you sign a paper saying that, and they give you a job, they give you food, they give you medicine. And if you have a passport or what we use, a cédula, ID card, no? If you don't have it, if you don't show it, you have it, but you don't show it, then your state is, how do you say fallido? The Venezuelan state is a failed state. They cannot even give you identification. So come, you're a refugee, sign here, Maduro wants to kill you, and you have an opportunity in Brazil. Of course, that's what happened in Florida with the Cubans. And you saw Cubans going on boats and whatever, because if you reach the coast of the United States, they will give you a job, they will give you an apartment, that you can be a player in the major leagues and whatever. No? That's what happened in Venezuela. But you know what happened as well? We have our embassies in Peru, in Ecuador, in Buenos Aires, in Santo Domingo. They are collapsed because now many Venezuelans were framed, no? ¿Cómo se dice? Estafados. Camp, whatever. Estafados. And they went there. They told them that they would have a job in Peru, that they would have a new life. You know, the Peruvian dream, like the American dream, no? The Brazilian dream for the Venezuelans. And when they arrived there, they sold their car in Caracas or their house or whatever, and they went there. And when they arrived there, they saw that was not true at all. And some of them are living like slaves. Like slaves, no? And only in Peru, we have 10,000 Venezuelans that went to the embassy and said, we are kidnapped here. We've been hijacked. We have no money to return to Venezuela, and we have no money enough money to eat here in Peru. Help us, please. So we have already sent, I don't know how many flights, I don't remember, and but it's not easy to bring, 5,000 or 10,000 Venezuelans by plane. So we are trying to arrange some other way, but it's not easy. And also in Brazil, more than 3,000 Venezuelans we have returned. We have paid for the buses because they couldn't eat. They were in the streets and they had no money to come back to Venezuela. and they are treated like slaves, and there's discrimination there, there's segregation. They're against the Venezuelans. We never segregated the Colombians in Venezuela. We give them houses, they go to our schools, and we love them, and we want them to stay in Venezuela. And now all these countries, I'm going to end with this. All this, you know, the United States, Trump is a businessman. He has a big company. So he has how do you say, the people of the directiva, the board. So in the board, there is the president of Colombia, who is a businessman, the president of Chile, who is a businessman, the president of Brazil, who is a businessman, the president of Argentina, who is a businessman, the president of Mexico, he's gonna be out of power soon, but he is a businessman, no? And he gives them orders. No, he's the, how do you call the chief of the boss of the CEO, and he tells them what they have to do. We have to invade Venezuela. We have to isolate Maduro. You have to say that you receive 1 million Venezuelans. You receive 800,000. You receive, and then they have a strategy. And why are they doing that? Because they want to reach. They want the world public opinion to reach the conclusion that there is a humanitarian crisis in Venezuela, and they have the responsibility to protect Venezuela, and it would happen like it happened in, there are no Dominicans here you know what happened in Dominican Republic in 1965, no? They began with this issue. There is a humanitarian crisis. There was a socialist president, Juan Bosch, no? And then they said there's a humanitarian crisis, and they gathered the ministers of foreign affairs of the OAS, no, the Organization of American States, and they said, we have to send medicines, we have to send food, we have to send doctors and nurses. And they sent maybe 20 doctors, maybe 30 nurses, some boxes of food, some boxes of medicine, and behind them, 10,000 Marines from the United States Army. And they overthrew President Bush, and there was a dictatorship in Dominican Republic controlled by the U.S. That is what they want to do in Venezuela. But we are not the Dominican Republic of 1965. We are not Panama of 1989. We are Venezuelan in 2018, and we know how to defend themselves. We hope that this never happens, because an invasion will be a catastrophe not only for Venezuela but also for the region. If they want to see migrants, if they want to see in 1 week 5 million Colombians to return into Colombia, that's going to collapse the Colombian economy. No? If they want to see Venezuelans all over the region, if they invade Venezuela. But most of the Venezuelans will not fly away. They will stay in Venezuela, and we will resist. And maybe what happened in Vietnam would be only a little example of what we are capable of doing to defend our independence. Do you think that if there were an invasion in Venezuela, you would find President Maduro in a hole in the ground like Saddam Hussein? Maybe he would. Maybe the Allende case. Allende, after all the investigations that have been done, they confirmed that he killed himself. But he killed himself because he knew that they were going to kill him. No, and he didn't want to give them the pleasure of killing him. But I know that President Maduro, maybe, or whomever of his team, maybe, most probably they would kill us, but we will kill 10 of them before they kill us. Huh? But those 10 would be young Americans from the United States, and we don't want to kill anyone because we love the people of the United States. That would be crazy to invade a country in the 21st century. But if it were to happen, we would have to defend ourselves. But it cannot happen. We have to stop it from happening. So if President Trump wants to meet with President Maduro in Singapore or in whatever, we don't have nuclear arsenal, but we have a revolution of consciousness, which is maybe worse than nuclear arsenal. No? They say, President Obama, who we respected until he signed this decree, this executive order saying that Venezuela represented a threat to the national security, an extraordinary and unusual threat. How can we harm the United States? Huh? I don't know. And but I believe we are a threat. Not only Venezuela, the countries of the ALBA, the Bolivarian alternative, no, and because we believe that socialism is indispensable, and that there will be no future without socialism. That we are going to eat each other in a few generations. There will be no food, no water, no oxygen if capitalism is still ruling and the dictatorship of capitalism is still in place. We are sure that that is the case. So we have to build socialism today. And you know that it will not be possible to build socialism in the world if we don't build socialism in the United States. So that is it's not easy. We can help. We can give you advice. But the revolutions cannot be copied or exported. That has no sense. So it's a great task that you have in the United States, where we are sure that you can make it. And it would be, well, the point of inflection for the building of socialism in humanity. But think about your children. Do you have children? Do you have children? Maybe they can be the last or generation. I'm not exaggerating. I'm not maximizing the issue. They could be the last generation. Or okay, not them. Then their children. But there is, as BJ said, there's no future. Capitalism kills time. Time has ended. The things are how they are. They will not be different in the future. If you are poor, you will be poor, and your children will be poor, and the children of your children will be poor. And we have to stop that. We have to stop it now. And I must tell you that I am also sure that the Bolivarian Revolution, in spite of all the threats, of all the isolation, of all the aggressions, we will find our path to get out of that of all of that aggression. We will make it. We cannot make it alone. We need of all of you. We need you to raise your voice. You know what happened today outside the United Nations? There was a demonstration of right-wing Venezuelans. There was this man who was a violator of human rights when I was young. He was the mayor of Caracas and the governor of Caracas, Antonio Ledesma. The repression happened every day. They killed students every week. Our old people, they were repressed. And this man was here today. And you know what happened? The ambassador of the government of the United States at the United Nations went to this demonstration. He took, megaphone? And he spoke by the megaphone. And he told these people, you have to be persistent. The USA is going to help you. President Trump is going to help you. We have to make Maduro go away. When have you seen in the history of diplomacy in the United Nations, where tolerance has to be the rule, that something can that may happen? No, it's like if our ambassador here, Samuel, went to a demonstration against the President of the United States, and he took a megaphone and he said, we have to overthrow Trump, he needs to be impeached and whatever. He cannot do that. Maybe he wants to, no? I don't know. But he is not allowed by the international law and by the Venezuelan law to do that. No? So these people are crazy. It is your struggle, the American people, but I must say it's also of the world, because this man is so unpredictable. No? But I don't know what's worse, really. No? So it's not a matter of changing the man with orange hair for the woman of yellow hair or whatever, no? It's not a matter of changing it's the system, and not only the system in the USA, it's capitalism. And I must close, as Comandante Chavez said that day. It was the 25th of January in Brazil, in Porto Alegre. He said the only way to overcome capitalism, to put an end to capitalism, I am convinced that there is only one way, and it is socialism. Thank you very much. Muchas gracias. Que viva el socialismo. Que viva Venezuela. Que viva Cuba. Que viva el pueblo de los Estados Unidos. Thank you very much. Hey, listen, there's a new one. No, just solo para, mira, para agregar otra. No, there's a new one that says, alerta, alerta, alerta que caminan Chávez y Bolívar por América Latina.
Thank you, comrades. Duro, amigo, el pueblo está contigo. Well, comrades, before we end the night, que viva. Before we end the night, we wanted to just leave the space expressing our extreme, profound gratitude to the revolutionary process of Venezuela. We are grateful to its representatives that have shared this night with us. We are appreciative of the lessons they have shared with us, with the points of discussion that we must continue talking about even after tonight. And rest assured, Comrade Foreign Minister, that the people of Venezuela have our complete solidarity. When we talk about the future, we cannot imagine a future without the revolution in Venezuela.